Hey guys, OJ Albini here, bringing you guys another cool little sequel type video to the channel. If you are newish here, because we have had a little bit of a jump in subscribers. First of all, thank you, I appreciate it. Second of all, right before the DLC dropped, we actually did a video here on the channel talking about the Pokemon that we knew were confirmed to come back via trailers and images and stuff like that we'd seen of the DLC and trailers and stuff like that. And we kind of tiered them and listed them in a draft league perspective, where I think they'll be at in the tiering rung, tiers 1 through 5, and what roles I think they'll fulfill and if they're good or not, despite what tier they're in. Like, I have Chansey in tier 2 and I think it's awful. I have Chansey in tier 2 just for sheer objectivity. I think it's a terrible Pokemon though. But I totally got this idea from a content creator that goes by Dr. Slacking. He's someone that I shout out a lot on the channel because I steal his ideas a decent amount. He did another video just like this, but more so talked about on the Pokemon's influences in the draft league meta and stuff like that. Please go check his stuff out. It's obviously great, and I totally got this idea from him. So I obviously have to say, like, hey, go look at the original before you watch the, scuffed copy of it. But definitely go check out his. He more so talked about their influence and things like that, which is cool. We're going to be just talking about, where I think they'll line up on the tiering, the tiering rung, and how good I think they are, and what roles they'll fulfill and stuff like that. So yeah, this is gonna be part 2. Part 1 of our video will actually also be linked in the description below. I have the Pokemon that we already tiered here, Scizor through Dedenne, all based, and they're all based on, like, I think Scizor is the best out of these Pokemon, etc., etc., etc. Like, I think Skarmory gives you the most value out of tier 2. They're kind of put based on value, which I think is cool. But yeah, with that being said, let's jump right in. First up, we have Sandslash, and a lot of people give Sandslash shit just because it's a little bit weaker. It's not the strongest ball in the world. It's not the bulkiest ball in the world, but I think it has great utility as a low-tier ground type. If you haven't, picked one up in the early rounds, I think this thing is phenomenal in all honesty. And something that people really sleep on is I think this thing actually got decently buffed this gen, with the addition of the smallest one is going to be the Rapid Spin buff. I think that's really nice because, Sandslash was a great, Stealth Rocker and Spinner, letting you get both of those roles in one Pokemon, as well as a ground type to soak up those electric attacks, so you're not Volt Switched all over all game. I think that Sandslash is, obviously a great budget pick for that, but Rapid Spin did get buffed this gen. Obviously, moving it up in base power a little bit, so it's not, just a 20 base power, little chip damage type move. Actually does a decent amount of damage to something, depending, And it also gives a speed boost, which can be nice for, outspeeding your opponents, stuff like that. This thing isn't the fastest in the world, so it's not the biggest deal for it. But I think the biggest buff to this thing is it actually got access to spikes. So now you have a Pokemon that, in one low tier Pokemon, which we'll put in the right tier here in a second, it can set up rocks, it can set up spikes, it can rapid spin, and it can stop you from getting Volt Switched all over on it. So I think this Pokemon has great value in about a tier 4 setting. I don't think that, Sandslash is suddenly a tier 3 mon because it got spikes, but I do definitely think that it definitely has a place right here in tier 4 ahead of these guys right here. I absolutely love Sandslash, and I think it's super slept on, just good value-wise. We're going to put his brother, a little Sandslash, here too. Similar to Sandslash, can do all 3 of those things, but it's not a ground type. It doesn't have a great defensive typing. No hidden power helps, but it's just not the best defensively, and it's a steel type. I don't know if you necessarily want to draft a little Sandslash as your only steel type. It's decent on hail teams. Like, if you draft a little tails, you can draft this as like a budget hail abuser, or even like an Obama Snow or something like that. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not the best. I think Sandslash is far superior. I would even probably do that. Yeah, we're gonna put that right there. So yeah, I think it's pretty solid though. Next up, we have Wigglytuff. I think Wigglytuff is a tier 5 Pokemon, but I also think it's very, very slept on. I think it has great utility in Wish. I believe it has Teleport as well. It has great special coverage, fat HP stat to pass off big wishes. It's a good AV user. It's a pretty just solid low tier budget fairy. It's also a normal type, so it gives you that ghost immunity, which can be obviously super, super clutch. Only issue is it's a fairy type that's neutral to fighting, which can be a little bit iffy if you don't have good fighting resist already. But I definitely don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I've actually drafted Wigglytuff myself and enjoyed it pretty decently. Competitive is a cool ability to potentially, punish some, hazard removal. And this thing does get rocks as well, so it's a good low tier rocker. Pretty solid though, pretty solid. Now, onto a really cool one. I'm going to do Alakazam before I do Kadabra, because I feel like you talk about Alakazam, then kind of just transition to Abra. Zam. I think, so Zam is a bit of, a point of contention in draft right now. Some people in Galar decks Wi-Fi, by the way, which is kind of what we're talking about at this point. Not really like a Nat Dex meta, because all these Pokemon are going to be a little bit less good in a Nat Dex meta, just because there's so much more, in those, tiers and stuff like that. But in the limited decks, A lot of people are kind of talking, where they think Zam should be tiered. Some people are saying tier 1. Some people are still saying, yeah, it should stay in tier 2. Personally, I think tier 2 is pretty crazy for this thing. I would 100% put it in tier 1. I don't think it necessarily gives your team as much value as all of these things. I think it's probably one of the more subpar tier 1s, but I think this thing gives you way too much value in tier 2, and here's why. One is the speed tier. In a limited decks where things aren't necessarily as fast, as we had in the past, there isn't as many like Cocos and stuff running around. 120 is ridiculously good. You're outspeeding a good majority of the entire meta. 2 is that Magic Guard ability. I think it's obviously great with Life Orb, obviously just boosting up your attacks to a really high level with the Life Orb, but not having to take that extra trip, which is nice, and you can still bluff like a Focus Sash set, which is also amazing on this thing. Having a guaranteed Focus Sash for scary setup to where you can throw off a big Psychic or Focus Blast, Dazzling Gleam. You can even be Sash Counter for a scary physical attacker that would potentially want to take advantage of you. Zam is phenomenal. I think it is an amazing Pokemon. And then on top of this, in this limited decks, it got access to Nasty Plot. And I think regular Zam takes advantage of Nasty Plot more than Mega Zam, just simply because of that Focus Sash option. Say you're playing against a slower team, you've identified Scarfers, or you have Webs or something like that. You can get pretty much a guaranteed Nasty Plot and just cleave through teams. Just absolutely tear through them. So I think Zam is like super phenomenal in this metagame. I really want to try it. And I think in tier 2, that's pretty crazy for Zam in my opinion. So I think it's firmly cemented in tier 1. I think it's a really, it might not be the best tier 1, but I think it's a very solid Pokemon in that tier nonetheless. Next up we have Kadabra. I think Kadabra is a tier 5 Pokemon, but I think it has good value. We're gonna put it right here. I think Kadabra has great value. It has a 105 speed tier, which is actually really solid. Decent special attacking stat, and it has the same ability as Zam. So it's basically just scuffed Zam, which can obviously be pretty nice if you need that 105 speed tier, something to stop those 110s from running, like, Adamant or Modest Natures or something like that. I think that's obviously super solid. So I definitely put Kadabra there. I think it's super solid. Next up we have Tentacle, and Tentacle is a mon that I've been using recently, and not actually I've been using it in APA Evolution, and I have absolutely loved it. This thing is a great special sponge. It's a great spinner, T-Spikes, Absorber, and Setter. I think this thing is amazing, has great value. We're going to put it right here in tier 3. I'm going to put it at the top of tier 3 compared to these Pokemon right here. I think it's absolutely phenomenal at its job. And I think the Rapid Spin buff is really nice for it because it does have decent offensive coverage. It's not the strongest Pokemon in the world, but due to potentially getting a spin boost, you could potentially run. I've run Modest Tentacle a ton of times just because it's very solid in that. Decent physical attack stat as well with Sword Stance, so you can maybe pull off some weird Sword Stance Rapid Spin set and potentially claim through a team. Like I said, you can set up T-Spikes, you can absorb T-Spikes and Rapid Spin away spikes and rocks and stuff like that. I think it's a great grounded poison. I think it really appreciates some good wish support because having your bulky water get worn down as easy as Tentacle does, switching it on hazards and sponging those special hits. It can be a little bit iffy, but I think it's really solid nonetheless. And it's a great AV user. I love AV Tentacle, especially because you can go like, Stabs, Ice Beam, Rapid Spin, and be very solid, and even be an offensive threat potentially. So Tentacle is great. Next up we have Magneton, and I think Magneton is also going to be sitting here right in tier 3. Simply because of the fact of having Magnet Pool and the option to trap steals is phenomenal. Being able to trap the Corviknights and Skarmories of the world can obviously be really nice. It did take a big hit with no hidden power, and then I think of it, I probably want to move it down a little. I still think it's in tier 3. I think it's a lot of value in tier 4, but it's very solid. It's probably a better Scarfer than Magneton just because it's a little bit higher of a speed tier, so it's not exploited by pretty fast ones. I didn't actually have Magneton on the list last time, so I wanted to add it this time because I do think it has great viability in draft. And yeah, at the very least, it's always going to force prep, which I think is very big. So yeah, Magneton's very solid. I think it's going to be right here in tier 3. Wish it still had the hidden powers and things like that, but it still do its job decent enough. And it gives you a decent Scarfer, and it hits very hard too as well. It still has like 125 special attack or something like that. So pretty solid. Next up we have Alola Eggy. This is another mon I would put right here in tier 5. Very cool Trick Room Abuser. pretty cool offensive typing with the fire coverage that it does have, so I think it's pretty solid in that, right? However, it's nothing crazy. You're pretty much only going to see this on Trick Room builds just as a potential setter and abuser. Other than that, it's not the best, but you can't say it's awful. You know, spec sets have their use. You can be, you know, like mixed life orb sets as well, because it does have a pretty good spread in both of its attack stats, but nothing too crazy. I think it's pretty firmly cemented as a tier 5 Pokemon at this point as a lifespan. Now, we have the Marowaks, and I want to talk about the better Marowak first, because that one's better, and we're going to talk about Alola Marowak. Now, we've obviously seen Alola Marowak tear up the OU tier right now, but and I love using an OU. I love using Marowak in general, so I want to preface this by I love drafting Marowak. I've used it many times, and I think it's phenomenal. I think it was super slept on in Gen 7 in draft. However, I think the only reason you're seeing this thing tear up OU right now is because it has a super favorable matchup versus a lot of the new big threats that came back that people are worried about. It matches up great against Magearna, it matches up great against Volcarona, things like that. And Ghost is just phenomenal offensively this gen with no pursuit. There's not a lot of ways to really punish Pokemon from just clicking that, you know, Ghost Stab, and obviously this thing getting Poltergeist being way stronger than Shadow Bone is obviously a great buffer. I think this Pokemon is phenomenal. However, there's always a but. I don't think it's going to be as good in draft as some people are thinking it is because of how good it is in OU this gen. I think Marowak is a very, very matchup dependent mon. If you're playing against slower, bulkier builds, you can really exploit them with Marowak and use this thing as just a crazy wall breaker. If you have Trick Room, this thing is a phenomenal. So if you draft Slowbro Alola Marowak and Trick Room teleport into this thing, you're probably going to claim a couple kills. Nothing really switches into it. Stabs plus Earthquake. Just ow. It's incredibly, incredibly strong. It's a decent rocker. It can click SD as well. It does get access to Flame Charge, which I think is a cool niche option. I've definitely run that before against some slower builds and stuff like that. However, against offense, I think Alola Marowak is pretty bad. Its speed tier is the greatest. It has good defensive utility in its typing, but it's just, it gets overwhelmed really easily. It's knockoff bait. The moment it gets knocked off, even if you live said knockoff, you're going to be, you know, obviously losing your Thick Club and losing a lot of your breaking power. Like in draft, you can't even switch in comfortably to that Ferrothorn most of the time because you have to fear that knockoff, and if they knock you off, you're pretty much useless at that point. So personally, I think Alola Marowak is still a tier 3 Pokemon. We're going to put it right behind Tentacle because I think Tentacle offers more to a team overall. I think it's great, and I think the correct player can really utilize it. Again, I absolutely loved it. I had an NCP Wi-Fi Season 1 back in Gen 7. I'm using it in a NatDex League, NCP Showdown Season 7, I think, right now, and I'm absolutely loving that. And that was before we knew about Poltergeist, so I can't even use Poltergeist because the league started before DLC and stuff like that. So I think Marowak's super slept on, but I also, at the same time, think it's going to be a little bit overhyped for the first couple months of, you know, this DLC meta. I think people are going to draft it very early. They're going to realize, this thing is a little bit matchup dependent. But otherwise, it's great. It has great defensive utility. I totally forgot to mention, it gets, you know, obviously being a fire type, it gets Wisp. It gets Pain Split as well for some semi-reliable recovery. I've definitely run, like, Spadef Marowak with Wisp and Pain Split and Stabs and stuff like that, and with the Thick Club and its pretty decent attack stat as well, and it's really high base power moves, you can run very minimal attack investments, so 2 a KO a lot. So I think Marowak is great. One of my favorite tier 3s to use, but I think it's going to be incredibly overhyped this gen, so I want you guys to make sure we're not, you know, jumping and grabbing this round too, because it's not as good as in draft as it's going to be in OU for the time being and stuff like that. So I feel like that's pretty important to, you know, mention at the time. Marowak, regular Marowak, is a tier 5 Pokemon. It's weird because they're pretty much identical in stats. It's just Alola Marowak's typing is so much better. This is just pure ground, which isn't bad offensively too, and it's obviously a good low tier, you know, potential electric to sponge up those electric type hits, but it's not the bulkiest thing in the world, just like Marowak isn't. And his defensive utility just isn't there. It doesn't have those key resistances to stuff like Fairy and you know, things like that, and Steel. And another big issue with it is going to be obviously the speed. It's just Marowak has a syndrome of, yeah, Marowak isn't awful, but there's so many other ground types in the you know, in the meta. What does Marowak offer you that another better ground type doesn't already do? Is kind of the issue with Marowak. So I don't think it's very great, but I also don't think it's awful. So we're gonna set it right here in tier 5. Lickitung. I freaking love Lickitung. I think this is a slept on beast. I'm gonna put it right here in tier 5. I think this thing has phenomenal value. This thing is incredibly bulky. Obviously, you're super weak to knock, you're super weak to fighting. But other than that, this thing is passing off decent wishes. I've seen Curse Lickitung go crazy. I think this thing is obviously just great. I really do like Lickitung as a super budget wish passing low tier normal with, you know, like Heal Bell and things like that. I think this thing is great. Don't sleep on it. It's very hard to break if you don't have the right build and you know, team for it. So I think it definitely has some utility in tier 5, and I've definitely drafted it and will definitely do so again. Now we got my boy Miltank. I obviously talked in the last video about how much I love Tangrowth. I think Tangrowth is a phenomenal Pokemon. It's by far my favorite grass to use, and Tangela is really no different. I love it. It's pretty much just as bulky, if not bulkier. I don't know the exact stats and calcs with Eviolite, but it's ridiculously bulky, and with, what do you call it, the Evo, it's going to be really annoying to kill, and you know, obviously you're a little bit more knock weak, but the regen is going to allow you to pivot in, pivot out. You're not going to need to, you know, throw synthesis on there. Just like with Tang, you can kind of just throw, you know, leech seed and knock off and, you know, sleep powder and all this annoying stuff. I think this thing's great. It's a little bit more passive than Tang, but it's still very solid nonetheless. It's a great ground resist. If you find your team a little bit more ground weak and things like that, it's just a great bulky pivot to sponge up hits, scout, and get on out of there. Very solid. I think it's a great tier 4. I really do love that thing. So we're going to put it right ahead of Sandslash because I think, again, it offers great value to a team. Next up, we have Scyther. And Scyther got some pretty cool buffs this gen. It got the, well, yeah, a couple cool buffs because I was thinking, like, oh, I got the new move. Well, the first one is obviously Heavy Duty Boots. I think that's great for it. Obviously, sometimes you're still going to want to run Scarf. You're still going to want to run Eviolite just to get that really good bulk and be like a bulky SD Roost set. But Boots are a really cool option as well if you don't want to have to worry about spinning away rocks, defunging away rocks, and things like that. I think that's very solid for Scyther. And it also got access in the DLC to a move called Dual Wing Beat, which is a 40 base power flying type move, physical stab for Scyther, which is obviously great because it's a 2-time move, so it hits 40 and 40, which is pretty solid on its own, honestly. But on top of that, it is going to be Technician boosted because Scyther does have access to Technician. So it's basically Brave Bird status of, you know, power there, which is, you know, obviously phenomenal because before you only had, like, what, Wing Attack and Aerial Ace as your flying stab, which is obviously Technician boosted, but they only go up to base 90. And with this, you're going to be going up, pretty much throwing off a no recoil Brave Bird, which is awesome for SD sets, awesome for Scarf sets, honestly, too. I think Scyther's a really slept on low tier mon. I'm saying this about everything. This one slept on. But we're going to put it right here behind Sandslash. I think it has good value, good speed tier, decently strong as well. I really do like this thing. Next up, we have Pincer. Pincer's tough. I think Pincer's a tier 5 Pokemon. I don't think it's bad at all. It's a low tier rocker. It has Moxie. It's, you know, decently strong. It has good coverage in close combat and Earthquake, and on top of it, the Bug Stab and stuff like that. But it's just very lackluster. It's not a Pokemon you're, like, looking while building, going, oh, damn, Pincer, I lose. You know, that kind of thing. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. I could definitely see someone getting some decent value out of it as a potential Scarf Moxie Sweeper, as a potential low-tier rocker. Boots is obviously nice for it as well, you know, potentially with, like, Swords Dance sets and things like that. But obviously, Mega Pincer is the main way you're going to be looking at Pincer in draft. But obviously, that thing's gone right now, at least in a Galar Dex Wi-Fi type setting. So I'm going to put Pincer right there in tier 5. Don't think it's horrible. Don't think it's great, though. It doesn't offer too much outside of, like, a really weird low-tier rocker, budget rocker. And maybe some bug-type offense if you have trouble with grasses or something like that. But other than that, yeah, it's decently solid. We're going to stay right here in tier 5 for Dunsparce. I don't think I really have to explain this one. This is a pretty bad Pokemon. I'm going to put it right in between the rat and the flying rat. Not very good. Bunch of wasted potential with a potential Evo and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not very good, unfortunately. Glare is really good utility. Serene Grace with, like, you know, Headbutt, I suppose. Throwing off some big flinches and stuff like that. Coil could be pretty funny. It's definitely one you have to prep for. But it's not very good, unfortunately. That's just me. I don't think it's the best, unfortunately. Next up, we have Heracross. No, I absolutely love Heracross. And Heracross got a cool buff this gen in getting spikes. And I think this is phenomenal for Heracross. This thing, as you know, is incredibly strong. Its stabs are great. They cover each other phenomenally. And it forces a ton of switches. So if you can force a switch, get up a spike, that's obviously great for your endgame. To where those checks are slowly switching in, taking 1 or 2 spikes, and then they're not going to be checks to your offense anymore, which is obviously phenomenal. It's a great Scarfer with Moxie. It's a great breaker with, like, Guts and Flame Orb and things like that. I absolutely love Heracross. I think it's phenomenal. So we're going to put it... I don't think it's a tier 2 Pokemon, though. Yeah, I was thinking like maybe low tier 2. No, it's not a tier 2 Pokemon. I'm going to put it right here at the top of tier 3. Because again, I think this... Stop. I think this Pokemon is absolutely phenomenal. I think Spikes is such a cool buff for this thing. I think it's amazing for it. So we're going to put it right there. Now, P2. P2 is another weird port in contention because people are kind of on the teleport hype train right now because of the fact that teleport is obviously a really, really good move, giving you negative priority. And P2 is a great abuser of it because of the fact that you have Trick Room plus teleport. So mons like Alola Marowak and things like that you have in your team, getting them a free switch in under Trick Room is phenomenal, is amazing. However, I think P2 is a little overhyped. I'm not a big P2 guy, honestly. I think it's incredibly passive. It's taunt bait. It's sub bait. A good player will know how to exploit P2. It's not the unkillable wall that a lot of people make it out to be. It's really not that difficult to deal with, in my personal opinion. Like, it's a good Trick Room setter. It's not a bad Pokemon by any means, but I personally just don't think it's as good as people think. I'm gonna still keep it in tier 3, where I personally think it belongs. I'm gonna put it right here behind our Alola Marowak. I think it's a good Pokemon, but I think it's incredibly overhyped. I think it's very easy to deal with just good prep, bring sufficient taunt and status and things like that. I think it's very, very overhyped, so we're gonna keep it right there. I think that's right where it should be chilling. Next up, we have Miltank. A great normal type. We're going to put this right here in tier 3. I'm probably going to put it ahead of Zoroark. And now I'm thinking about it, I'm going to do this. Miltank is a very, very cool low tier normal. For a couple of reasons. It's a little bit unique because of the fact it obviously gets its own reliable recovery and Miltank. It gets Heal Bell for cleric support. It gets rocks. It has pretty decent coverage. It gets scrappy, so it can seismic toss everything in the freaking game. It's a little bit passive, but if you invest correctly, it's not the most passive thing in the world. And something I think that is really, really cool about Miltank is how ridiculously fast it is for what it looks like. This thing should not be base 100 speed. It makes no sense, but it is, and it actually comes up clutch a lot because you're not going to, even without a lot of investment, you're going to outspeed the annoying fat things that you need to. And with investment, you can catch some things off guard and obviously be really annoying. I've seen Banded Miltank put in some work because he could just stall body slams for the to the end of time. I've seen Curse Miltank be very, very annoying. I think Miltank's a great Pokemon, and I'm going to put it firmly in tier 3 in a limited dex format. I know it's more so seems like a tier 4 mon, and maybe I should move it back a little bit now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I'm going to put it right here. I know it's more so seen as like a tier 4 mon a lot of the times in a Nadex meta, but I think in a meta like this, it can really end up thriving because there isn't as many scary things that really, really threaten this guy. So I really do like Miltank, and I think it's pretty solid right there. It's a good rocker, good cleric, just annoying fat normal type that can really be very solid. Next up, we have Sharpedo. Now, Sharpedo is another Pokemon that I think should be in tier 3. It's a matter of where I think Sharpedo should be. I'm going to put Sharpedo right here. I think Sharpedo is a phenomenal offensive Pokemon. This thing is very, very scary to deal with speed boost and, just being able to compound and really do a lot of damage in the end game. Life Orb sets are great. Sass sets are great. It gets access to Destiny Bomb, which is really cool with speed boost, potentially being able to catch your opponent off guard. And it actually got access to close combat this gen, which I think is very, very solid coverage for it as well. So I think it's kind of just a really solid tier 3 mon. A lot of the time you want your Dark type to be a little bit bulkier so you can switch into Psychics a little bit better, but at the very least you're going to pressure Psychics offensively immensely with this thing. Throwing big crunches and liquidations and close combats, Ice Fangs for grasses. You have pretty decent coverage. You can go special as well. You can go mix Life Orb. I really do like Sharpedo. I think it's pretty solid. I think people definitely sleep on it. So we're going to put it right there in tier 3. Wailord. This is another tier 5 Pokemon in my humble opinion. I'm going to put him right here. Wailord isn't awful. It's decently bulky. It has a fat HP stat. You can pull off funny Scarf Water Spout sets against really slow teams, but it's really not that good, unfortunately. So we're gonna throw it right there in tier 5. It's a lot like Marowak, and it's not awful, but there are so many other water types that are 8,000 times better, and water is such an important typing. Why would you ever draft Wailord as your bulky water? So we're gonna throw him right there. I think he's pretty solid right there. Next up, we have Lopunny, awful Pokemon. Next, we have Licky. Great Pokemon. I love Licky. I think Licky is phenomenal. We're going to put him right here. It's just Licky Tongue, but better. Cloud9, I forgot to mention for these guys too, is obviously really, really nice with weather. You can't run Wish plus Cloud9, which is a bit annoying, but you can still pull off Rest Talk sets and things like that, or even if you have another Wish support mod for it, you can use that. It has great offensive coverage. It's definitely less passive. SD Licky is also a menace. If you're going up against a bulky SD Licky, you're going to be in it for a bad time with this. It's good coverage, throwing out body slams, and, being really fat and annoying and wishing, and this thing's great. I really do love Licky. I think it's phenomenal. I love drafting this thing right there in tier 4. I think it's a great, great, great normal type. And obviously Cleric as well. Next up, we have PZ. And I love PZ, man. I think it's so good. I think it's so utterly slept on. However, as much as I want to move it up to a tier 2 in this limited decks, I don't think I can really ever do that. It's a great, great wall breaker. I'm going to put it right here. Great wall breaker. A little bit of a subpar speed tier, but just throwing off specs, adaptability, try attacks is so satisfying. It's going to tweak KO so much of the meta, and it's not like the ghost of the metagame really switching either. It has Shadow Ball, and it has great coverage and Bolt Beam, and a bunch of moves like that. Nasty Plot, it gets Recover for like bulky Nasty Plot recover sets. It gets Agility as well, so it's a great sweeper. I really do. You can pull off like funny conversion sets and potentially switch up your type and really, fool your opponent. It gets access to Trick as well, so you can cripple, potential Chansey coming in and try attack or something like that. I think PZ is a phenomenal Pokemon, and I love using it. It's probably my favorite normal type to draft, at least offensively. I think it's so much fun to use. But regardless, we're going to keep it right here in tier 3 because I think that's, where you're going to get the most value out of it. I don't think I'll draft tier 2 PZ, unfortunately, and I think these Pokemon ahead of it offer a little bit more to a team overall opposed to PZ, but I definitely recommend you try this guy if you haven't done so already. I see PZ go undrafted a lot, and it really makes me sad because I think this thing, utilized correctly, can be an absolute menace, so we're definitely going to keep him right here. Stoutland. Okay, so I personally am not a big fan of Stoutland. I don't like it very much. I've drafted Stoutland when I've had sand before. Like, I've drafted Drill Gigalith, and I'm like, why not get Stoutland? It's a good low tier, potential abuser. I have drafted Stoutland 3 times. I think I've brought it 1 time. It's not very good. It looks good on paper, and when you use it in practice, it's not the best. It doesn't pick up the KOs it needs. It's not bulky enough. It's just not a great Pokemon. And then it losing return, personally, in my opinion, really did hurt it. It has good utility in Sand Rush and, Scrappy and Intimidate. So 3 great abilities, but it just does not have the stats in the move pool to really back up, what it wants to do, if that makes any sense. I think there's so many other normal types that are much worth drafting more than Stoutland. So I'm going to put Stoutland, personally, right here in tier 5. I would never take it in tier 4. I don't think it should ever really be there. Next up, we have Scolipede, and this is another Pokemon that I absolutely love using, and I think it's going to be great in this metagame. Obviously having access to Spikes and T-Spikes is a great hazard setter and T-Spike absorber. It gets, obviously speed boost to boosted speed plus Swords Dance, so it can be a potential scary sweeper. I've had Scolipede in a couple leagues right now, and Swords Dance, like heavy-duty boot sets, are really nice because it's not the bulkiest thing in the world, so it's a little bit hard to get off an SD sometimes. But if you don't have to worry about taking rocks, it's a lot easier to EV to take 1 hit from most things and get up a Swords Dance and really steamroll through a team late game. You can also just be, Protect 3 attacks, Life Orb sets, or just Spikes 3 attacks, Life Orb. It's a great, great mon utility-wise. It has a great speed tier outside of being speed boosted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it right up here. Right behind Tangrowth in front of Magnezone. I think it's a phenomenal tier 2. So we're going to keep him right there for the video. Lilligant, another tier 5 Pokemon. I don't think it's great, but there's so many other weather abusers that you can draft over it. I don't really see a need to ever draft it. In my personal opinion, at the very least, you could have obviously had a great season with Lilligant. I don't think it's a bad Pokemon, but there's so many other mons that I would personally rather use than Lilligant, and it's not the best bulky grass to potentially be a ground resistant, things like that. So we're going to leave Lilligant right there. I don't think it's the best. I don't think it's the worst, though. So definitely has decent utility. But Whimsicott is definitely better out of that duo from Gen 5. Amoonguss, another Gen 5 grass type. I'm going to put Amoonguss right up here in tier number 2. I'm going to put it right here ahead of these 2, just because I think Volleytoad is just solely Rain, and Chansey sucks. I almost said not very nice about Chansey. But obviously regen coming back, Amoonguss is going to be a big part of those regen cores with, Slowbro plus, Amoonguss or Slowking, which I did not put on this tier list. Oops. I think Slowking's a tier 2 mon. I didn't put it on here, but Slowking is definitely a tier 2 mon. I just totally forgot to put it on the Pokemon there. So just pretend he's chilling like right here. But yeah, say your Tangrowth gets sniped and you want to go Bro Amoonguss. That's obviously very, very solid. It gets Spore, which is, an incredibly spammable move. I absolutely love that. I think Amoonguss is pretty solid. It's a bit passive, but you can obviously be Clear Smog or Foul Play to stop potential setup and, being able to use that way. Being able to Spore. Its stabs are pretty solid as well. So I think Amoonguss is pretty solid nonetheless. It's definitely going to be very, very sought after Monolog just because regen is so good. And we're going to leave him right there. Next up, we got Boof, Big Bouffalant, and this is a Pokemon I think is super, super slept on. I love Bouffalant, and I really, really want to draft it in the Gen 8 Wi-Fi League just to show how good this thing is. It has good abilities, and Sap Sipper obviously giving you immunity, so I think it could be pretty solid on a potential rain team. Soundproof is great for checking potential special attackers like a Sylveon or something like that. Something that's going to be using Hyper Voice. Checking a potential Toxtricity. It's a great Toxtricity check with like an AV, what do you call it? Soundproof set. Obviously, because most of that thing's moves are going to be, Overdrive or, Boom Burst or something like that. So that's obviously super, super solid for it. And then I believe it gets Reckless as its last ability, because I know it's got that signature head charge ability. Move. Let me double check. I apologize going on my phone in the middle of the video, but I don't want to switch tabs and like mess that up. So we're gonna go Boof. Yeah, it gets Reckless. So obviously boosting up head charges to ridiculous amounts. This thing also gets SD, so it could be a pretty good bulky SD mon. I think Bouffalant is amazing. I actually got smashed by Bouffalant in the semifinals game in Gen 7 because I didn't prep for it. And it was Sap Sipper, and I clicked like Sleep Powder with my Tangrowth, and it came in, absorbed it, set up a Swords Dance, and was at +3, and threw up a +3 head charge, and I didn't have a switch in. So this thing is very, very solid. It gets Close Combat and Earthquake as well to go on top of its normal stab, so I think it's great. I'm personally going to put it right up here. I think Tauros is better. I think these Pokemon are all better, but I think... I want to put it right here. I think it's great. I think it's... Okay, I put it behind a lot of things in Tier 4, but I think it's great. I think it's super slept on, so we're going to keep it right there. Next up, we have Clobitzer. Very strong Pokemon, but very frail and very slow. It got Terrain Pulse, but I don't really think that matters too much. Honestly, if you want to draft some gimmicky Terrain Pulse things to try and get Clobitzer to work, I'm all for it. Go for it. However, I don't think that makes it very good. I'm going to put it right here in Tier 5. It's a wall breaker, I guess. It's not a very good one. Just because of how slow it is, and it's not, bulky enough to really back that up. It got Flip Turn, I think, which is also nice, being able to get momentum and stuff like that, but it's not the best, so we're going to keep it right there. Tier 3, Klefki. I was going to say Klefki, and then I said Tier 3, the tier that I'm going to put it in. I think Klefki is very solid. Obviously, getting that Prankster Spikes, that Prankster Defog, potentially, T-Wave, Switcheroo, stuff like that. Very, very solid annoying mons. Prankster Screens. It's not the best as like a Soul Fairy type or Soul Steel type, just because it's not very bulky, and it doesn't stick. Oh, it's bulky-ish, but it doesn't stick around over a long time, just because of not having any reliable recovery. And if you're not running lefties, especially if you're running like a Light Clay or you're like a weird Trick Iron Ball set or Switcheroo, I mean, it's not going to be the bulkiest thing. It's not going to be around for the longest amount of time. However, it's a great Pokemon just overall, and I think it's definitely firmly cemented in Tier 3 in this gen. Lycanroc Midnight, I think that's what this one's called. I totally forgot to... Well, the other one I had didn't have all of the Lycanroc forms. I kind of talked about where I would put them all in the last video, but we're going to put Lycanroc Midnight in Tier 4. I think it's pretty garbage. I think it's probably the lowest Tier 4. I think it's a little too good for Tier 5, but I think it's pretty lame. I don't think it's very good at all. It's very slow. It's very slow, and it's not bulky enough to be as slow as it is and, still have good viability. So we're going to keep it right there in Tier 4. Lycanroc Dusk, though. We're going to move this guy all the way up here. And I'm going to put him right here. This thing is a beast. Okay, I loved it in Gen 7. I thought it was great in Gen 7. It has a great speed tier. It's incredibly strong. Accelerock is great priority. Tough Claws boosted as well. And obviously being a fast rocker, it's a great lead. It has Taunt. It has Swords Dance. Great Pokemon, right? And then this gen, they decided, let's give it Close Combat and make it Mini Terrakion. This thing's going to be a menace. I think Close Combat, a lot of the time, just because of the Tough Claws boost, does as much as Stone Edge, against potential neutral mons. So I think that's obviously phenomenal for it. There's a reason Terrakion is so good. The Rock plus Fighting coverage, not much in the game switches into that, besides, your H/Dupe Blades and stuff like that. Nothing switches into that. And this thing gets Drill Run and Crunch for those mons as well. I also got Psychic Fangs and Play Rough this gen. Psychic Fangs is cool, not the biggest thing in the world. I mean, it'll be nice in draft, depending on the matchup. But Play Rough is great for dragon types. Now you don't have to run Outrage on your Lycanroc Dust for the Flygon. You can run Play Rough. So I think that's very solid. Like I said, great rocker, great potential SD sweeper, great with a band, great with a Life Orb. Absolutely love Lycanroc, and I think it's going to be great in a limited meta with the buffs that it got. So we're going to put it right up there in tier 2 because I think it's going to be a freaking menace to switch into. Next up, we have Lurantis. Now, I actually just played against Lurantis recently, and I won't lie to you, disregarded and unprep completely. Completely didn't look at it. It came versus me, and it did really, really well. I think it does really well versus fat builds. I think AV Lurantis is an absolute menace, being able to off Superpower, Leaf Storm, being able to live a lot of hits and just kind of punch holes through teams and, having to trade basically at least 1 or 2 mons just to take it down. I think it's great. It gets access to defog as well and synthesis and things like that. So it's a great contrary mon. And we're going to put it right here, I think, in tier 4. I don't think it's the best tier 4 by far, but I think it's very slept on at the very least. So we're going to keep it right there. Now, Comfey. We're getting to the end here. Comfey. A lot of people shit on Comfey pretty heavily due to the loss of hidden power because this thing's pretty much walled by steel types. However, I think it's getting a little bit too much flack. I think it's still very, very solid. That Triage Draining Kiss is obviously very, very nice priority on top of Giga Drain and priority Leech Seed and priority Synthesis and getting Defog and U-Turn. Great utility out of that, right? It's not the bulkiest mon in the world, but it's great utility. On top of that, you also have access to stored power now, so you're not completely helpless against poison types. You don't know how many times I've seen in early Gen 8 in like low tier leagues and stuff like that, or just leagues in general. Comfey will come in, it'll set up a Calm Mind, a poison type will come up. They're like, I wall this thing. It can't be hidden around ground anymore. It doesn't get psychic. The Comfey will come in, it'll set up a Calm Mind. The poison type will come in. It'll set up a Calm Mind again as the poison type throws off a Sludge Bomb, does like 30% procs weakness policy, and then drops to a stored power, and the rest of the team dies. You can actually muscle through some steel type with that as well. I think it's very solid in that sense. It also gets access to aromatherapy as a cleric. So I think people really sleep on Comfey. I still think it's a tier 4 mon, but I think it's phenomenal. I think people really, really, really sleep on it, and I think it definitely deserves a little bit more credit than it's getting. Now, lastly, we got Palossand. And Palossand is a mon that definitely got a cool buff this gen. It got access to a new move called Scorching Sands, which is basically ground-type Scald, which is great for an annoying fat mon like Palossand that didn't necessarily need to run Earth Power for damage. It was just kind of its special normal stat, but this makes it a lot more annoying to pivot around, especially as a physical wall. So it's going to be a lot more annoying to kill if it can burn you, things like that with an attacking move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Palossand right here. I think it's a little bit better of a ground type than Sandslash just as a ground type. I think Sandslash might offer you more utility to your team, but I think Palossand overall is a better Pokemon, if that makes sense. Just being a great bulky rocker. Defensive typing is great. Reliable recovery. Obviously, its stabs are pretty solid as well. Actually gets access to Rock Polish for some cheeky Rock Polish sweeps and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely solid in its own right. So we're going to put it right there in tier 4. And that's going to be all of them. We don't have any of like the new mons, so I don't have Galarian Slowbro, I don't have Urshifu, I don't have Zarude. I can tell you right now where I think they would go. I think Zarude is a tier 1. I think it's a little worse than Zam. I would probably put it right here. The Urshifus, I would put them both at the top because they're both really freaking good. And then I would put Galarian Slowbro right here at the bottom at tier 3. I think Galarian Slowbro actually gets it's a lot like Comfey, gets a little bit too much shit. I think if you have access to regen on it, it's actually pretty solid. It's obviously not anywhere close as good as Slowbro, but I think it's pretty solid nonetheless, and I like its offensive typing a lot. It's a good fighting type check, so I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. It's not great, but I think it's a little bit too much shit. But regardless, that's pretty much going to be our list. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, you're like, hey, you're an idiot. Blissey is a tier 1 Pokemon. Let's discuss. Let's talk about it. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe. We got plenty of competitive Pokemon content going up each and every day, whether it be stuff like Draft League discussions like this or Draft League games. Hopefully coming back here soon with the DLC. We got a couple Wi-Fi leaks coming up, or just, a good amount of Wi-Fi battles and Showdown Lives and things like that as well. So this is definitely your spot if you enjoy competitive Pokemon content. Like I said, definitely check out the people I'm linking in the description below. Pretty much just Dr. Slacken, because again, he did this and he did it first and he did a great job. So definitely go watch his. But yeah, with that being said, I will catch you guys in the next one. Later.